You're listening to Packers Talk Network. PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans, just love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into all the national sports media talking points and nonsense. We're sticking with real football. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials and subscribe to that Packers Talk YouTube channel. All those things help us out tremendously. We greatly appreciate them. And before we get started, a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Tim, how did that preseason game leave you feeling, man?
I feel a lot better now than whatever the hell that was that we watched on Sunday night against the Broncos. Even by preseason standards, that was brutal. That was a really tough watch.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. It wasn't even entertaining. You couldn't even be just like, at least we got some good football on TV. It's just like, oh man, it was dragging on. The guys, I had to mute the TV. I don't know about you. I couldn't keep listening to it.
Same. Yeah, I was a game I couldn't wait for it to be over. It was awful football from the Packers, and really tough to find any kind of positives as far as who might have had a decent performance in that game, because it was just all around bad. And
that's pretty bad.
Yeah, not a good performance. And coming off of a joint practice with the Broncos where, by everybody that was there to witness it, said that the Packers weren't very good in the practice either. So trip to Denver wasn't very successful for the Packers, but maybe they can take something out of it. They can learn from it. Maybe it gives them a wake-up call. It's pretty early to be getting a wake-up call, but maybe it gets them focused in more and get some of these guys who are battling for roster spots, gets them to up the intensity, because it's not often you see a coach, especially a coach like Matt LaFleur, come out after a preseason game and really question his team's fight and their desire in a football game. That's kind of eye-opening, but maybe this makes them better somehow going into really important week against the Ravens, where they're going to practice with the Ravens, have a game with the Ravens, just like they did with the Broncos. So hoping that this week is a fresh start and a new beginning after what we just saw on Sunday night against the Broncos.
Well, I do have a silver lining for us. So I want to bring good news to everyone, right? We're going to bring good feelings to what's going on right now. Everything's going to be okay. So my take here is you got a tale of two teams. The Packers know what they have, know who they are, largely are trying to figure out who their backups are going to be, right? Not a lot of starter battles going on, maybe a couple, but not a lot. It's not a new system. You're not trying to prove that you know the system. For the most part, the starters aren't. So, yeah, I guess on the offensive side, the defensive side, it's a little different, but still not a lot of starters that we saw on the defensive side either. So I think it's just a tale of two teams. The Broncos are a young, unproven team. You got a new quarterback, a lot of young guys trying to earn starting jobs, trying to make the roster. Just sort of, Sean Payton's trying to build morale, right? And there's certain things you got to do. There's certain ways that you do that. You go out and you compete and you really, try to measure yourself up and find some good wins against, maybe better competition or, whatever. Just not your own guys, right? Because everybody's sick of their own guys at this point in camp. But anyway, so when you have that, you have two teams that are going to act very differently, right? You're going to, the Packers, what I saw was they were protecting guys from injury and concealing strategy as much as possible. Oh, by the way, let's not forget who the play caller was in this game. We'll get there in a minute. So, on the other hand, the Broncos, like, again, they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to figure out who their quarterback is going to be. A lot of guys trying to prove themselves. So they're going to go out and they're going to try to get every win that they can. They're not necessarily trying to reserve themselves as much, probably not trying to conceal strategy as much. So I just think it's a little bit different in the demeanor of the teams that you have in that game. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not justifying anything. I just think that that's the reality of what happened. So, when you get to the game, you don't see most of the starters, right? And so good news is most of the starters probably won't get hurt, right? You will probably see some injuries, but chances are you'll maintain a majority of your starters. So that's good news. The other good news is you'll probably maintain your play caller. Unless something horrific happens to Matt LaFleur, heaven forbid, please knock on all the wood. Stinovich is not going to be calling plays. So I'm no big fan of Stinovich. I was awfully critical of him last year. I give credit where credit's due. He is part of bringing that offense together and building it and all of that. But I just don't believe that he understands offensive strategy as well as Matt LaFleur does. So when you have that guy calling plays, there is going to be a drop-off from if Matt LaFleur were calling plays. So, when it comes down to why did you have a 0 on the board for the offense, there's a lot of factors, but those are pretty big ones right there. And those are not concerns for the regular season. So that's where I would say let's just take it for what it is. A lot of young guys got reps. They got reps against quality opposition. And the coaches and, the evaluators got a good look at those guys. They got a lot of reps, a lot of good tape on those guys. I will say, while we're wondering who had good performances, Sean Ryan playing well at center was not on my bingo card. Did you notice he was actually pretty good?
Yeah, and I thought he was pretty good against the Browns too, and I think it's helping.
Did he play center against the Browns?
Yeah, he's been moving between guard and center, actually, left guard and right guard and a little center too. So, yeah, I think if you want to take a positive, and maybe it's not even so much against the Broncos from the Broncos game, but it's just preseason training camp in general. I think it's that their interior line depth at least looks pretty good. Jacob Monk has come on in the last couple of weeks and looks good. Jordan Morgan was running with the starters. Unfortunately, he got hurt. He was back last week, just an individual. So hopefully this week he's back for team drills. And maybe we see him against the Ravens. Ryan playing center, playing both guard spots. I think they have versatility up front, and I think they have better depth on the interior. Tackle spot's a different area, which we can get to. But, yeah, I think as far as last night's game goes, one team took it way more important, and I think dialed up the intensity a lot more than the other team. And
yes,
you can see that the Packers rested 31 guys, and the Broncos played their starters. There's going to be a difference in talent right there, and there's a difference in urgency right there. And I also read something that last year the Broncos had practiced with the Rams, and it didn't go well, and they kind of got smacked around a little bit. So maybe that had something to do with their preparation and practicing, and then having this game with the Packers, and that, like what happened last year, we're not going to let that happen again. We want to treat it, with more purpose this year. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But it certainly looked like, what Sean Payton was calling on offense was stuff that they're probably going to run during the regular season. And what the Packers were calling on offense was stuff that they probably installed on the beginning of mini camp and OTAs. And they were going to keep it as vanilla as possible on both sides of the ball, really. I don't care who's calling the plays. They had a very limited playbook and a very limited call sheet, and they were going to keep it as vanilla as possible. They don't want to show anything to anybody.
Exactly.
And that doesn't really do a good job of helping your quarterbacks, your offensive linemen, your running backs. It doesn't do a good job of helping them that.
Right.
But that's the purpose that Matt LaFleur puts out there for that. Like, he sets the tone. He sets like, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to show them all the cool stuff we have in our playbook because we don't want that on film yet. So we're going to, keep it as bland as we possibly can. It probably hurt their performance, but at the same time, they had a lot of guys in a lineup that are fighting for roster spots, whether it's in Green Bay or whether it's somewhere else, whether it's a practice squad spot. And those guys, it's really hard to find players from that game last night that helped themselves. Maybe they didn't completely play themselves off the roster, but they didn't do anything to help themselves. And there's a lot more questions now than there were. Grand scheme of things, overall, I agree with your point. We're talking about the number 2 quarterback. We're talking about who the 4th offensive tackle is going to be. We're talking about depth guys, role players. Yes, they may become important during the regular season because you need all 53 guys in the regular season at some point to play a role. But we're not sitting here talking about like multiple starting positions.
Right.
Those guys didn't play, so we don't have a great look at them, but they're comfortable enough that they didn't feel the need to play. And we're talking about depth guys that, where we have concerns. So yeah, it was a terrible performance on Sunday night, but I think, some of the things we saw on Twitter and both Sunday night and all day Monday, people need to calm down and understand preseason football. A lot of this, actually almost all of this, doesn't matter when it comes to regular season football. And hopefully a month from now, we completely forget that this ever happened. And that's usually the case, good or bad. We've seen it with the Packers where they look really good in the preseason and it doesn't carry over to the regular season. We've seen where they, there's a lot of questions about the team and they go on to have a really good season. So did it really mean anything? Probably not in the big picture. But this is a big week now for the team, a bigger week than it was before they went to Denver. So there's a lot of guys that need to rebound. And I think even the players that didn't play in the game, who had a poor practice against the Broncos, this is a week to respond and to start getting things together against the Ravens and heading into the regular season.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And we can talk about what we expect in week 3 here in a minute. But I think my biggest takeaway is not necessarily being concerned about anything like you're saying. Most of the starter battles are pretty settled. The guys that are on the bubble, it's good you can evaluate them, but they're not going to have probably a huge impact on the regular season in ideal circumstances. What I was more disappointed by was, not seeing guys maybe take a little bit more command of their position battle, right? Emmanuel Wilson looked less than stellar. He had a couple of runs that were pretty solid, but he came back to earth a little bit. The quarterback battle definitely left something to be desired. And I think that really illustrated the differences between the teams for me, is what made it most obvious. Is, you got Bo Nix really trying to gut it out and make plays and score, and they're really excited about it on the sideline. The biased announcers are pretty pumped about it. There's a lot of energy around, him trying to make some plays. When you're trying to evaluate who your quarterback's going to be, you have to call certain things to see if they can do it. You can't conceal strategy the way that the Packers can right now, because they don't need to see if Jordan Love can do it. And the things that they need to see from the backups, they can see certain things without having to run certain concepts. So it's not nearly the same as trying to figure out who your starter is going to be. So that, to me, was probably disappointing, seeing those guys come out and not deliver a great performance. I was also pretty disappointed by the linebackers on the defense. They definitely looked outplayed in a lot of different ways. The D-line was interesting because they got good penetration, but a lot of times that was used against them. They'd get penetration in the wrong spots in the wrong ways. So the pass rush was there, but against the run and in other situations, it didn't look good. So it was just a very interesting game to me. Not very entertaining, unfortunately. We're hungry for some good, entertaining football. It's almost here. But at the end of the day, you preserve the health of most of the guys here. No major injuries. You didn't have to reveal anything on film, which I think will be more valuable in the long run. And you get a little bit of a humble pie, right? You get a little bit of an experience of what it's like to get beat, and you need that, right? Every year, I mean, there still hasn't been a perfect season since the 72 Dolphins. You know, the Patriots came close in 2007, but every year, no matter how good the team is, a humbling experience happens, and usually it's for the better, you know, but sometimes it wrecks the season. We've seen that happen too. I think in this case, it's great timing. You know, you're right in the middle of training camp, and you've got an immediate opportunity to respond that also doesn't count, you know. So you get out there against the Ravens. I think that from a player's perspective, the Ravens are probably a little bit more of a respectable opponent. With the Broncos, there's just not a lot of clarity about what's going on there, like we talked about. But the Ravens, they got a squad, you know, and that's going to be a tough day in practice. It's going to be a tough day in the game, and I don't think that there's any question about that for any of these Packers players. So I think mentality shifts a little bit, you know, in this next week. But yeah, I'm not worried about how this game went about. I'm not worried about how this will impact the season. I don't think that this is foreshadowing of any future issues. I guess we could wrap it up with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to be foreshadowing when 31 guys didn't suit up.
Right.
So, yeah, as terrible as it looked, and I've seen it all over Twitter and the Packers.
Panic button, panic!
Right, the Packers blogosphere about panic. Like, we're talking about depth guys, and yes, they can become important during a season. I completely get that, but
not all of them all at once.
Right. Like, if you lose your entire offensive line at once, yeah, we're going to panic. Like,
yeah, that's a problem.
Right, that's a problem. Like, and definitely players needed to play better last night, and there are some questions and concerns that I have about the depth on the team. But I don't think it's foreshadowing. I don't think we can draw any conclusions, good or bad, about this team yet, because they didn't play 31 guys against Denver. And week 1 against Cleveland, the starting offense played 3 snaps.
Right.
So it's really tough for what we're seeing as fans, unless we're there every day watching training camp practice. And even still, we're talking about practice. Practice. Like, it's hard to get really huge conclusions about this team. So I don't think it's necessarily foreshadowing anything. But this week against the Ravens, like you said, I think it's a really important week. I think it's going to be a good test for how they bounce back. And they're getting a team that's physical, the team that practices hard, that takes the preseason seriously. I think the Ravens, up until might have been last year, they had like a consecutive winning streak in the preseason that either tied the record or set the record, something like that. They'd won a ton of preseason games in a row. Means nothing, but they at least took it seriously for whatever that's worth. Like, they're a physical team. They're, a team that was in the AFC Championship last year. So I think it sets up well for them to have the Ravens coming in. And I think it also gives the coaches a lot of stuff to go back on and get on these guys about. Like, there's a lot of bad film Sunday night.
Yeah.
And it gives LaFleur and all the assistants an opportunity to go in there and teach and to get on these guys and, expect improved play, and not just, fundamentals and technique, but just like grit and fight, the feistiness you need. Like, fight for your job, fight for your position, go take somebody else's job. Like, you have all the motivation you need now this week. The Ravens. So it's going to be interesting. It'll be definitely fun to track how they do in practice, and then obviously the preseason game.
Yeah, no, and this is the perfect time. It's a perfect time because you got a little humble pie, you got some good film to jump into and correct, and you also have an opportunity to correct it almost immediately against another opponent, and before it really starts to matter. So I think that's timing's good. Nothing to panic about. Let's jump into the comments here. We got a few favorites with us. R Showers jumping in. LFG, let's effing go. Good to see you, R. Chris N with us again. Good to see you, Chris N. Let's go, fellas. It's a good Monday night. Glad y'all are with us. R over here got to remind us, bring up the receipts. That's totally cool. Who told you we still need a backup QB? Heineke, Tannehill, Ritter. You can't claim to be a contender, risk having these backups. I get it. I hear you. we hear you. Packers Nation hears you. I think they're committed to this. I think they're committed to what they're doing here. And the path to growth is not linear, So you've seen Clifford play well. You've seen some flashes of brilliance from Pratt here and there. Just got to let these guys duke it out. And I would bet that if you're going into week 1 and you're not okay with either of these guys, then maybe you see a transaction. But I think as long as you're in training camp and you have an opportunity to evaluate these guys, correct them, try to, help them grow, I think you're going to try to maximize that. I don't know. What do you think, Tim? Are you on the side of go get somebody?
Well, as far as what the Packers will do, I'd be shocked if they go out and get a veteran, because I think they want to draft and develop, and they want to draft and develop at that position. If it was me, yeah, I would go out and get a veteran. I don't feel comfortable enough. I'd probably want to see one more week and one more game from them just to be sure. But at this point, yeah, I'd feel more comfortable with a veteran and trying to get Pratt or Clifford through the practice squad and let them develop, for a season on the practice squad. But as far as what the Packers would do, I would be really surprised if they went out and got a veteran. It doesn't seem like it's their way. Like Brian Gutekunst has talked in the past about, he wants to get back in the business of drafting and developing quarterbacks.
Exactly.
Making this almost maybe a yearly thing or almost a yearly thing, but drafting a quarterback and developing them behind Jordan Love. And, it was Clifford last year. It's Pratt this year. For him to go out and get a veteran, you're almost giving up on both of those guys pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's their thought. For me, yeah, as a fan, I'd feel a lot better if they had one of those veterans behind Jordan Love and, we're developing one of the young guys on the practice squad. But I don't expect them to go that route. I think they keep Clifford or Pratt, whichever one, unless they're just awful this week against the Ravens. Maybe then there's some doubt that they bring in a veteran, but I don't know at this point. I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah, I don't either. Our buddy Matthew Tan jumping in. Are we going to have Clifford on the practice squad and put Pratt at Love's backup? I think that's probably the real question. Good to see you, Matthew. Glad you're here with us, man. And yeah, I think that's what is being battled for right now. And if I had to pull out my crystal ball, I'd say Pratt maybe wins the battle and Clifford goes down to practice squad. We'll see. This game could have a big sway on that. Clifford goes out and has a big game and Pratt doesn't. I think you could get the inverse of that pretty quick. And hopefully it just doesn't matter because Jordan Love stays healthy and successful. Right. But, yeah, that's what this is for, right? And that's why, a lot of folks don't like the preseason. Players even want to get rid of it. I just don't think that's a good idea. I think you need this time, and it's a good time to shape your team, grow your team. You're learning things about guys' character, and it's all part of the process. You got to let it play out and see where it takes you. But I do trust these guys. I think they know what they're doing at this point, right? We've identified Aaron Rodgers, and now they've identified Jordan Love, and there's going to be Hall of Fame quarterback number 4 on the other side of that. So I think that whatever they go with here, I trust that they know what they're doing, and I trust that they know how important a backup quarterback is, right? And that's one of those things. They know where they're at better than we do. It's just as easy if you're Goot, calling Matt LaFleur, hey, man, what do you think about Tannehill? You were his offensive coordinator. Yeah, he's a great guy. If we really need him, because Love goes down, then sure, bring him in. He'll get up to speed pretty quick. But the thing is, if Love goes down, like you're I don't know, the ceiling on what you're trying to preserve is lower. Like you're not. It's not like you're going to call in Ryan Tannehill and maintain your Super Bowl hopes or fill in backup quarterback, veteran quarterback. It could happen. It's possible. I've seen crazy things happen in the NFL, but I think it's just about managing your expectations. So Definitely very important, especially if it's a thing like where you need them in there for a game or two. But I trust that these guys know how to navigate those waters. I guess that's the best way to wrap that up. And then we got R back in here. If Clifford is the backup and Love is out for 3 weeks with a groin pull, that's 0-3. Backup QB is important. Yeah, you're pulling words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I think it's more important if it's a short-term thing like that, where it's 3 weeks, 1 week, something like that, than it is if it's like an out for the season thing. But yeah, I mean, say Love goes down for 3 weeks, you got your backup in there. You can assume 0-3, but if you bring in a veteran who's still got to learn the system, and you're going to have a much smaller playbook for at least a couple weeks, what's your best case scenario there? Like 1-3, 1-2, maybe. I mean, 2-1. Like, I mean, it just. You got to kind of understand, like, I don't know. I just trust them to navigate as the situations come up. It's hard to play all these different scenarios because there's a million of them. But, yeah, it's an important position, and these guys are at least getting a lot of quality reps that you can evaluate. The last thing you want is to not be sure. At least we can probably be pretty sure at the end of this evaluation who wins.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, they're not obviously going to base it all on what happened against Denver. So you got all a training camp, you got all a mini camp, and this week coming up against the Ravens to really evaluate it. So, yeah, I think going back to R's point about Jordan Love's out for 3 weeks, that to me is the concern, like, because that could make or break your season, whether or not you make the playoffs or not. He goes down long term for the season or something like that. I don't care who the quarterback is that you're going to get to step in as a backup. It
won't be the same.
No, and it's your chances are pretty much done then. But if it's a short term thing, do you trust Clifford or Pratt to come in there and play competent football for 3 or 4 weeks? At this point, I wouldn't trust it. So can somebody else do it? Maybe. And that's where I think us as fans, we're looking at it more short term, whereas the front office looks at it as like long term. And maybe they won't be up to the task this year, but maybe we can develop them into that and be our long term backup. And that's what you do with the draft and develop situation. And it's a long term view, and it kind of, as fans, it's tough to see that, but that's the reality of when you're developing these guys, is what they're going to be down the road. So to me, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with a veteran there who's played the game and at least shown they can get you through, a few weeks as a starter than I would with what they have right now in Clifford and Pratt. But, at this point, I don't see him going that route unless it's a really bad week against the Ravens, then maybe it's a possibility.
Yeah, it really does. There's a lot that hinges on their performance this week, and things just change so quickly week to week. So hard to predict these things, but think about what we're really focused on here in the preseason. It's the backup quarterback situation. There's just not a whole lot of concern, and I would even say, to kind of steer the ship back the other way. Was there any players or any performances that stood out to you and exceeded expectations in week 2 here?
It was tough to find, but I'll give a shout out. I thought Brenton Cox did a pretty good job rushing the passer. I thought he made some plays, had some pressures. I also thought Aaron Mosby, who's probably a practice squad candidate, but he was on the practice squad last year. He made some plays pass rushing as well. I think those two guys, especially Cox, who's likely to make the team again, I had a good week. I thought Tyron Hopper at linebacker did some nice things. He had, it looked like he had some issues in coverage, and especially in space. But for his first preseason action, just coming back off an injury, I thought he attacked the line of scrimmage, tackled
That's what I was going to say. He really did come downhill pretty well.
Yeah, tackled pretty well. So I thought he did some nice things. Offensively, it was really tough. But, I think maybe not so much the Denver game, but we talked about it at the top of the show. I think Sean Ryan, Jacob Monk are kind of established themselves inside. May not be starting week 1 in Brazil, but they're going to be guys that you feel pretty good about, kind of in that guard center backup versatility that they've shown. So, I feel good about maybe not so much their performance against Denver, but just overall in the preseason, those two guys. But for the Denver game, I think it was hard to see, as far as standouts. But Brenton Cox to me was a guy that really showed up and looked good. And I think he was, in pretty good position to make the team before the game, but that performance against the Broncos solidified it. And, at this point, I don't think he's necessarily 100% locked to make the team, but I think he is in really good position and would be a surprise now if they ended up cutting him, which is unlikely.
Yeah. No, Sean Ryan was the one that got my attention, and I guess that totally went over my head that he was playing snaps at center last week because I didn't get to see a lot of them. But as I was watching, I'd try to at least for almost the first half go and watch each position on each play, and I was just impressed with his consistency at center. He snapped well. And he moved well. He didn't seem thrown off by it. It didn't seem unnatural to him. I'm sure he wasn't perfect, and there was probably a couple things here and there that he didn't grade well on or whatever. But to see him go from this inconsistency at right guard to at least having some quality snaps at center, I thought that was really interesting and probably a really good boost for his chances to stay on the team. Whereas Royce Newman got to go. Like, man, this experiment, I don't know what we're doing here. Like, this is too much. I'm done.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting. He was the only player on the team to play every snap last night, and I think that was kind of your job's on the line. We're gonna let you play it out and fight for your job and see what you can do. I mean, this is going into, I think, his fourth year at the team, so they're giving him all the opportunity to make the team, and his performance it's just
not there.
No, it's not there. It continues to be poor, and I don't think he makes the team because I think whether Sean Ryan starts at right guard week 1 or Morgan, between Morgan and Ryan and Jacob Monk, I think they have enough guys on the interior of the offensive line where I don't see you, unless you're going to keep another interior offensive lineman and one less tackle. I guess Newman would be that guy, but it's really tough to see a spot for him opening up unless there's an injury, which hopefully there's not. But it's long past time to move on from Newman, and I think his performance now through 2 weeks of the preseason shows that he's not cutting it. I don't see a way they keep him.
I don't either. I just not good. Not good. And shout out to R for the input here. Definitely need this mention. Oh, shoot. Sorry, wrong one there. Need this mention here. Our punter kicked butt, man. 4.99 average hang time, over 53 yards per punt. He was player of the game. Hey, I am old enough to remember a time where we could not find a punter to save this team. So I will certainly
last year
appreciate that.
Every year since Craig Hendrick.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, talk to me in November and December when the weather changes.
We'll see.
We'll see. But cool. Good for the punter.
Good old Wheelan, right? That's who got Wheelan. Hey, punters are important too. Punter lives matter, all right?
Sure.
But yeah, not a whole lot out there exceeded expectations. I will say I watched some Javon Bullard reps, and I really like the attitude he's playing with. I feel like he's delivering on kind of who you thought he was. There were several times where he had to come up and set the edge, and he was willing to get physical with guys that are much bigger than him. And he throws his weight really well. So that was fun to see. Just things like that. Those things don't show up on the stat sheet or even on the grade sheet. So just tossing some thoughts and notes like that in there. Some other things that I saw. I will say one thing on the first drive. So the first two drives. I think it's first drive. There were 2 balls by Clifford that were not completed, but they were beautiful. Heath and Melton both dropped them. And if he completes those, you're probably talking about a different game for Clifford. And that first drive, I thought he looked like in command and in rhythm, and then after that, everything fell apart. So for what that's worth. And Definitely not a fan of Clifford throwing the dump off on 2nd and 17 in a preseason game without even – it didn't even look like he was letting the play develop. That one really bothered me. That was where I was really pretty much done with watching Clifford. I don't think 3rd and 17 went much better. I think they threw a screen on that one. But, yeah, when you're throwing dump offs on 2nd and 17 in the preseason game and you're trying to compete for a position, man, it's just not – it's not a good sign for where your head's at, I want a little bit more of an aggressive quarterback at that point, try to get me some yards. But anyway, so I guess we were talking about exceeding expectations, not being disappointing in this game. But yeah, let's shift gears here and put eyes on the Ravens, So who are you watching this week? Like, who is, maybe it's a position or a player, who is of most interest to you?
I think it's just overall, I want to see better effort from the team in general. In the practice, I want them to practice better and have better performance than they did against Denver. And then whoever, whether it's starters or just the backups that are going to play the preseason game, there needs to be more urgency in this game and just a better overall performance. Like, just bounce back and show that, I know it's preseason, but your job matters, and the performance that you're putting out there when you're on the field for the Packers matters, whether it's preseason or not. So, like, just an overall team, this is a bounce back week, and to show more urgency and just I want to put a better product out there than they did against Denver. So yeah, that's one of them. I think it's going to be interesting because they're going up against a physical Ravens team. So who's going to respond? Like, are you going to stand toe-to-toe with these guys? Because they're going to try to bully you. Mm-hmm. So are you going to punch them back, or are you going to fold? Because, they were folding in Denver. So I want to see that. And to me, it's the problem areas. It's number 2 quarterback, what we talked about. It's the depth at offensive tackle, which – I think at this point we're probably talking about who the 4th offensive tackle is. We know the starters are Walker and Tom. Andre Dillard, and we've talked about Dillard before. He's probably making a team. I mean, they started him last night. I think he played 2 drives, and then they took him out and left the other guys in there.
I mean, he's
looked decent at left tackle. Right tackle has been the problem, and that was early in camp where Sean Gary was killing him. Yeah. He's gotten a little better from everybody that's watching camp. He's gotten a little better on the right side, but he's been pretty solid and consistent on left side.
So through 2 preseason games, he's got a 62.8 grade on PFF, which isn't bad. That's, it's about average, I guess, somewhere in there. But his pass block grade is 90. That's elite.
Yeah. I mean, look, I didn't love the signing. I know we're going to get people in the comments who don't like Dillard. I get it.
Yeah.
But basing it on what we're seeing at left tackle for a potential 3rd offensive tackle, it's not bad. He's doing enough where he's, at this point, I think he's going to make the team. But whether it's Kadeem Telfort or Travis Glover, who got a lot of playing time against Denver and looked pretty bad, but he's a 6th-round pick as a rookie. Caleb Jones, like, I want to see one of those tackles step up and, like, take the position, try to, make a case for yourself to make the team. Because right now I don't see how any of them have put on film enough to make this team. So, like, those guys, and then we haven't even gotten into the kicker, but I think their kicker might be on a different team right now.
Oh no.
Because I mean, it's Greg Joseph started off good, and he's been bad the last couple of weeks. He had to kick last night. He missed it. It wasn't close. Carlson has been okay. I mean, if they had to make a kick tomorrow to win a game, any of them, do you think any of them can make a 40-yard field goal to win it? Like,
actually, that's the problem, isn't it? Isn't it like, Carlson's pretty good from like 50 plus. But it's like that, like 40 to 50 window that he struggles in, I think is what it was. I was reading something about that, but
yeah,
listen, here's where I'm at. Kicking to me, and I've never been a kicker, but I was good buddies with some kickers when I played football, and to me it seems a lot like a golf swing. I think that there's a lot of a lot of mental stuff going on there. So I lean more towards sticking with a guy. I think that there's benefit in showing a guy, hey, I have faith in you. You will get this figured out. You will be able to do this. We've seen Carlson. We've seen his ability, man. Like, he's got a stinking leg. Like, he could maybe kick it from 70 yards at some point. When you got that, like, you should try to hone it, you know? And it's not like they haven't tried, right? They brought in 2 other guys. You bring in an old guy and a young guy, you know, and Greg Joseph's no slouch. He was a pretty good kicker throughout his career in the NFL. I think you got to stick with Carlson and you know, show him that sign of faith. And I was on the same page when Mason Crosby was struggling all those years ago, and people were ready to get rid of him. And then the next season, he was the best kicker in the league. So I think that there's something to that, showing a guy, hey, we have faith in you. You're the guy. You can do it. Go get it done. That's where I am. But yeah, it's tough.
It's tough, and I think they want Carlson to take the job. Like, I think that's like their hope. And ultimately, I think they probably will end up Carlson's their week 1 kicker. But at this point, if he has a shaky week this week, I mean, I don't know how you cannot be looking at the waiver wire next week and figuring out if there's somebody better. Like, it's not going to be Joseph. He struggled too much.
Yeah, I don't think so. That 47, man, the way he missed that, it was just like, no, that was your chance to take that.
Yeah, he started off camp good, but the last week or so, 2 weeks, he's been really inconsistent. So he's kicked himself off the team. I think it's Carlson or somebody that's on another roster right now. And it's a big week for Carlson. If he gets chances in the preseason game.
Yeah.
But I think they want him to take the job. He hasn't done it. Like,
yeah,
he hasn't taken hold of it. So are you going to trust that and hope that, yeah, once we get to the regular season, he'll figure it out, or it'll just all come together for him because he is young and he has got a strong leg? And I don't know. That's a pretty big leap of faith to take. And I'm not sure I'd be willing to do it. But I think they might.
Well, where you're at, I mean, it's kind of the same thing with QB2. You still have reps to see. You still got game to evaluate. They'll probably do some pressure situations in that joint practice. You know, put the kickers through something. You know, I don't know how much mingling goes on there, but it'd be kind of cool if something from Justin Tucker could rub off on these guys. But yeah, I mean, you got to see how it goes. You know, we've got to see who takes the job, who loses the job, you know, which of those two things happens. Maybe both of them happen. But yeah, I just where it's at right now, that's the way I'd lean, you know, stick with Carlson, give him, you know, show him the sign of faith and see if that can fix some of the mental issues. Cause it helped with Crosby when they stuck with Crosby, you know, through that tough year that he had. Everybody was saying get rid of him, and he was bad. It was not good. He bounced back and, you know, definitively, you know, answered all the questions. So I just think that's where I lean. Is that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. It doesn't mean that's what'll happen. But, you know, it's not like kicker is an easy position to just go out and find. You know, there's not just a ton of them out there. I will say there was the dude in the UFL or USFL or whatever it is now that, like, he was nailing 60-plus yarders like it was his job, and I guess it is his job. But, you know, they could have gone and plucked him, and they got beat to the punch on that one. So outside of that, I mean, what are you going to do? You know, you're going to call Mason Crosby? Maybe you call in him, and you can have Mason Crosby do your short yardage stuff and have Carlson handle your 50-plussers. I don't know. I don't think they call Mason Crosby.
No, they're not. I think that ship has sailed, and
yeah,
I don't think he'd be any better at this point. You know, he's at the end of the line. He was at the end of the line when Green Bay let him walk away. So no, you want Carlson to take hold of it, and he just hasn't. And it's a big week. Maybe he does, and they feel comfortable enough to go into the season with him. But if he doesn't, then it's going to get real interesting as far as what they do at cut down time.
We got a 49ers fan in the comments here. That's the first 49ers fan I think we've had in the comments.
Yeah, we haven't had 49ers fan.
We've had some Bears fans and some Vikings fans and some Cowboys fans. I hadn't had a 49ers fan yet. Welcome. I'm not going to show your comment, but glad you're here. No, and then we got R chiming in. Dillard is better than Royce. That is as far as I go. Hey, that is better than we started camp with. So we knew we didn't like Royce, but the fact that we're willing to say that Dillard is better than Royce, I think that's a win.
And I'm not
happy with
saying he's like, look, I get all the concerns with him. I really do. But what he's done throughout the preseason, I think you got to give the guy credit. He's pass protected well, especially when he's been at left tackle. So that's where they are with Dillard. And I think at this point he's most likely going to make this team, whether you like it or not. But I think he's going to be on the roster to start the season.
Yes, it seems like he is, and I'm okay with that. I mean, look, if you're playing well, I don't care if you weren't playing well before. You're playing well now. Let's take it.
And he's playing well, and none of the younger tackles have played well. They haven't taken the job when they've been given a lot of opportunity. Telford, Caleb Jones, or Travis Glover. None of those guys have taken hold of that swing tackle position, and they've been given tons of opportunities to do that, and they've all struggled. So
right.
Dillard's earned it.
Well, this is another interesting thing, and I'm just noticing this as we browse through PFF for whatever this is worth. The Packers are tied for 7th through the preseason so far in special teams. Not bad. 89.5 grade on special teams. Tied for 7th. So, I mean, hey, I'll take that as any kind of indication of a turnaround. Other than that, pretty much middle of the road on everything. And that, at the end of the day, as a team, this doesn't really matter that much.
No.
Some of the individual grades are interesting, but
and
the way we know that is that the Bears are are they the best? Are they really the best overall graded team? They are. The Bears are the best overall graded team through the preseason so far. That's how you know that these PFF grades don't mean all that much at the end of the day. Just the ones that we like.
Do they get put up a banner for that? Or?
I mean, they don't have a banner to put up for anything else. They should, Hey, we want something, right? You want a little bit of something with your new quarterback.
Yeah. He's in the Hall of Fame already. But to get back to the
that was fast.
It was. But apparently based on, 2 preseason games, he's earned that. So.
Yeah, don't look now. The Jets are 4th overall graded team in the preseason, and the Vikings are 3rd. So it's not looking good right now for the Packers through the preseason. All of the teams that we dislike are at the top. Thank goodness none of it means anything.
But what does is this week against the Ravens, and I want to throw another thing out there because we were talking about the Ravens practice. They're going up against Lamar Jackson, which I think is going to give their defense an opportunity. Now, I don't know what the Ravens are going to do in practice or even if Lamar Jackson plays in the game, but potentially to see a mobile running quarterback and that quarterback running game. And I think that's really important for the Packers defense because their first 2 games, they have Jalen Hurts and then Anthony Richardson, who are 2 guys that are going to run, good quarterbacks, but they have – maybe they're not Lamar Jackson level as far as the running game goes, but those guys will be taken off and running at some point. They will be featured in the running game. So it's nice that the Packers get to practice against a mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson. Hopefully they get to see something. Hopefully the Ravens give them something to see in practice that they can use as far as a game plan goes, for the first 2 games that count in the regular season.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I'm curious how much the Ravens will reveal or throw at the Packers. Again, they're a much more similar team to the Packers as far as being established, being just a good team in the hunt. They're going after a championship this year. I don't think the Broncos can say the same thing. So, I think it will be interesting to see what they are trying to accomplish in the joint practice and in their preseason game. and what they're willing to throw at the Packers. Obviously, you're not going to get a chance to tackle Lamar Jackson. But yeah, practicing those pursuit angles, just your attention on the play, breaking down and where he's at, I think that's going to be a good exercise for this defense. I'm very interested to see who we actually get to watch compete. I want to see Jair go against some of these receivers. The one-on-ones to me are always the most interesting. We didn't get that as much last week. We got a little bit of the receivers, the Packers receivers against the Broncos DBs, but I didn't see Jair out there. So yeah, I'd like to see more competition this week in those situations and the one-on-ones and stuff. But again, these guys are gonna decide, what they're trying to accomplish here, and if their goals are to evaluate backups, we're gonna see less starters and more backups. So
you're right.
We'll see how that goes.
I think practice will be a lot of starters against starters.
I hope so.
I think that's where it's going to be. But as far as the preseason goes, I have no idea what the Ravens are going to do. And LaFleur wouldn't commit to anything after the Broncos game, which I thought was kind of interesting because after the Browns game, he came right out and said, we're not playing the starters next week. So it seems like he's undecided. Personally, I hope he plays the starters. I think they need to get some snaps against the Ravens, but we'll see if they do or not. So, yeah, I think the practice will be really important for the Packers this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think you see more starters in a controlled environment. I think the reason you get an uncommitted LaFleur is because you'll probably see some starters rest still and others go. I think one thing about this next week, if they really are trying to evaluate QB2, you probably should have more of the starting O-line in there. You probably should have more of your starting receivers in there. I don't know about your running back situation. They take a lot more of a beating than anybody else. So maybe you let those guys rest a little bit more. You don't play Jacobs. Maybe you play Dillon. Who knows where Lloyd's at? I think he's still injured.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see more starters. I don't think you'll see Jordan Love. I think at this point they're happy with where he is and, get him down there in live action and don't get him injured until you have to, or, don't expose him to injury until you have to. But otherwise, I'd expect to see a lot of the starters, especially on defense. I'd expect to see, the starting linebackers, see more starters on the D-line, and, get a better feel for how the system is going to work. Watching the backups in the system is harder to watch because these guys are not only figuring out, what to do, but how to do it. And so there's a lot going on. It can't be as much of a strategic thing to watch. It's a lot more just calling fundamentals, and it's just sort of a jumble. You don't know what you're going to get. That's why I'm not. My expectations this week are not high. I don't think that we're going to get much more than we got last week, to be honest. I hope we do. But I think you got two teams who are probably more interested in preserving health and concealing strategy than anything else.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think from the Packers' perspective, I think they probably do rest most of their starters. It might be very similar to the 31 guys that sat against Denver. For me, I think they do need to place at least a couple series. But, if you're going to sit in week 2 against the Broncos, then I'm not really sure they're going to turn around and say, all right, we sat them 1 week, now we're going to put them in this week. I would think they're just going to sit them all together. Not the way I would go, but we'll see what happens. And that's why the practice is going to be really important for those guys. And hopefully they perform a lot better than they did against the Broncos in that practice last week.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely want to see them just show better, right? Like whether you win or not, whether starters are in or not, you want to see a little bit more competition. You certainly don't want to get embarrassed, let's take a step forward from this week now and show up this next week. Yeah. But yeah, on the other side of that, you got the trip to Brazil. So, the meaningful football is coming. It is upon us.
Fast.
question here from R, and I was actually just trying to find this. I'm not finding any answers here for you, R. Is there any word on health of Marshawn Lloyd and Cooper?
I mean, they haven't been real forthcoming with, but Marshawn Lloyd, it was a hamstring injury. It's the second injury of camp, and he's not back to doing anything yet. So maybe this week, but I wonder if he's a candidate to start the season on injured reserve, which would keep him out the first, I think it's 4 games or 3 or 4 games is the rule. That way, probably Emmanuel Wilson then makes the roster as a third back.
Right.
But being that it's a second injury, he hasn't had much training camp practice. I think it's at least a possibility that he starts on IR. And Cooper, he's been hurt, I think, since the beginning of August.
Yeah.
He went down, not too long into training camp, I think right around family night with a hip injury. And I know there's been some, the reporters that cover say he's out there at practice and he's, following along, behind the defense, watching each snap, but he's not even back to individual drills yet. So again, he's fallen pretty far behind. And I wonder if this, if he's not available this week against Baltimore, I wonder if he's a candidate to start the season on injured reserve, because the new rule is you can put 2 guys on right at cutdown day and they can come back later in the season. So I wonder if Cooper and Lloyd, or at least one of them, ends up going that round. For Cooper, it kind of sucks because he was a second-round pick, and I think everybody expected him to start right away.
Right.
And at this point, I mean, there's no way. Eric Wilson, McDuffie are ahead of him. Even Hopper at this point is ahead of him as well. So, yeah, I think it's hopefully he's back this week against Baltimore, but there's been no word on if he's close or not. So we'll see. But, yeah, those guys are still out, and, who knows? It may linger for both of them in the regular season.
Well, now as I'm reading through some of these updates, it looks like they thought Cooper had a groin injury. It's actually a hip injury.
Yeah, it's
not a groin injury. So just depending on what that is, he's probably got a better shot at coming back before Lloyd, because Lloyd's is a hamstring, right?
Yeah.
Now the hamstring, that's tough. The more time you can give him, the better. So who knows when Lloyd is going to feel like his hamstring is strong again. So yeah, I would probably bet on Cooper to be back first. But yeah, they both could start on IR and give the Packers, a longer look at 2 other guys on the roster. Not sure how they'll play that, but this week should give us an idea at least on if they'll be back or not.
Yeah.
So hopefully they will, man. I would really love to see, what Cooper can do. I was really excited about him as a, second-round pick. A lot of people thought he could have been a first-round pick. He plays angry. He plays fast. He's somebody that I definitely want to see flying around on the defense out there. And I will say this, the linebackers are not impressive right now. I mean, Eric Wilson's had some good play and, all that, but that looked like the weakness on the defense to me. They didn't look comfortable covering. They looked outmatched in the run game. So, yeah, I think as many bodies as you can get in that group right now, the better. So hopefully he's back soon. But
yeah, it sucks. It would have been nice to see both Lloyd and Cooper in the preseason. 2 guys, we were definitely looking forward to seeing, and now they missed both games. Even if they come back this week with the way the Packers bring guys along, they're not going to be playing in the game. They may be back to doing individual stuff, but they're not going to let them play on Saturday after getting 2 practices if they're back this week. So yeah, that stinks. But it's neither injury sounds like it's long term, so it may be a thing where they, it takes them some time to be ready to go in the regular season. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything that's going to impact the entire season or, a couple months of it even.
Yeah, no. So that's something to watch for. But, these are relatively small things right now. Relatively small concerns that we've got here in the preseason. So I'm excited still about what is ahead. I'm getting very excited for that game in Brazil. Friday night, man. That's pretty cool. Getting to watch the Packers on a Friday night is going to be kind of special. Friday Night Lights. It is just a few weeks away now.
Quick. So, it was a terrible performance in Denver, but let's not panic. Like, everybody calm down. It's preseason.
Yep.
And
now's the time to make the mistakes so you can correct
Right.
them and move along. So, yeah, I think that there's plenty of that's going to happen. But, that's all we've got for this evening, for this week. So tune into that Packers game. Do you know, are we going to be able to watch it, or have you been able to check?
It's not live.
Not live.
For those of us, not in Wisconsin, it's not going to be live on NFL Network. So
Gotcha.
Not sure exactly when they're replaying it, but if you're outside of Wisconsin, you won't be able to see it live, unfortunately.
You'll have to get on Twitter and get all the live tweets from the frustrated
and
Packers Twitter.
At some point, it'll be on NFL Network, the next day or a couple days
3
later.
in the morning or something like that.
Yeah, so whenever you can get to it, get to it. But unfortunately, they're not going to have this one live.
No, but we will get to it. We will try to get our hands on it as fast as possible and bring y'all the summary, the breakdown, the analysis from a couple of humble Packer fans here. We don't claim to be experts on anything, but we have eyes and we do love the Packers, so we might know a thing or two. But yeah, thank y'all for joining us this evening here on the Packers Weekly Podcast. I definitely invite y'all to come back next week, every Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Central, unless the Packers are on Monday Night Football, and then we'll go to Tuesday night. But we would love for y'all to come back with us next week, break down that game against the Ravens, and start to talk about what's coming against the Eagles. Should be a lot of fun. If y'all want to help us out, support the podcast, if you enjoyed the episode, please spike that like button for us. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Twix, as I call it, Facebook, Instagram, all the socials. And please subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. We will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go